I often get asked a simple question. What kind of men do women like? And honestly, we shouldn't be surprised when a woman chooses a man who is clearly a terrible option for a serious life. There's one crucial thing you need to understand. A woman in love cannot be objective. Falling in love is one of the strongest cognitive distortions that exists. Let me tell you a disturbing story about my ex-girlfriend. She was a decent girl. Caring, calm, nothing extreme. She had 2 ex-boyfriends before me. If we're being objective, money, looks, status, they were more or less on the same level. But here's the difference. The first guy was more sensitive. More romantic. He invested more into the relationship. And she left him. Later, when he tried to reconnect, sending a friend request, trying to say hi, she didn't even respond. She didn't care at all. The second guy? Arrogant. Cold. Emotionally careless. And here's the most interesting part. He cheated on her with her best friend. Sounds horrifying, right? You'd think after something like that she'd erase him from her life forever. But no. After some time passed and the pain faded a bit, she still replied to his messages. She congratulated him on holidays. And it was obvious, absolutely obvious, that she could have gotten back together with him. Should this surprise us? Not really. Because falling in love is based on emotional shock and intensity. But women almost never understand this cause and effect relationship. They always explain their attraction through his qualities. They call it love, destiny, chemistry, astrology, fate. And they completely ignore reality. They ignore the fact that he slept with her best friend. Once she's in love, that no longer matters. That's why when a woman is in love with a man, she will justify anything. No matter how bad he behaves. And this works the other way around too. Good men get dumped, betrayed, and cheated on, far more often. Why? Because a kind, decent man doesn't strongly affect a woman's biochemistry. Everything is biology and physiology. And biology lies to us constantly. For example, women are attracted to athletic bodies. Why? Because on an instinctive level, it signals high testosterone, which means strong reproductive potential. But in reality, that same athlete might have zero fertility due to steroids or supplements. Another example. I recently came across a study showing that men with narcissistic personality traits attract women more than psychologically healthy men. From a logical standpoint, that sounds absurd. But on a sensory level, a narcissist often appears confident, decisive, dominant. Which unconsciously signals safety and survival. And this is confirmed by reality. Just look at how much content exists for women about narcissistic men. Women constantly falling in love with them, suffering, trying to escape, then going back again. If it didn't work, that content wouldn't exist. Another observation. Women often say they hate womanizers. But have you ever seen a woman reject a man she likes because he's had many women? Never. She doesn't block him. She doesn't say, "Sorry, this won't work." Why? Because from a biological survival perspective, he's a competitive male. Other women want him, which means he has value. Now here's a simple experiment. Ask a woman. What qualities do you like in men? You'll hear something like, he should be caring, romantic, reliable, faithful. Then look at the man she suffered the most over. And suddenly, you'll notice. He had none of those qualities. So how does that happen? The answer is simple. We like to believe we're rational and conscious. But modern people choose partners almost the same way humans did hundreds of years ago. Except now, there are no traditions or social limits stopping bad choices. Today, if someone feels attracted, nothing can convince them otherwise. And that leads to a harsh truth. It's almost impossible to fall in love with a genuinely good person. If we rely purely on feelings, and most people want to rely on feelings, we will never choose a truly good life partner. Never. Because qualities like kindness, honesty, loyalty, from an instinctive point of view, have zero biological value. And this is very easy to prove. I've never heard a story where a man lost his mind because a woman was kind. No one says, "Bro, she's so honest. I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't stop thinking about her." In real life, it doesn't work like that. I often notice this while sitting in traffic. I look at expensive cars, luxury sedans, sports cars. And I honestly can't remember a single time when a powerful, successful man was driving, and next to him sat a quiet, modest, humble woman with soft manners and a simple presence. No. Usually, next to him is a woman whose face already shows entitlement. A certain arrogance. Sharp gestures. A specific facial expression. So where is the correlation between kindness and demand? If kindness truly increased attraction, then scandalous women would be driving rusty cars. And modest, moral women would be riding in Rolls-Royces. But reality shows the opposite. The more brazen, the more demanding, the more aggressive, the higher the perceived value. And the same applies to men. I've never heard a woman say, "Natasha, I think I'm deeply in love, my legs are shaking, my head is spinning. He's so modest." It sounds ridiculous. If morality increased sexual attraction, top models would be standing next to men at church services. But that's not what happens. So let's be honest. About 95% of people just want to fall in love. They don't care if you're good or bad, honest or deceitful, faithful or a pathological liar. It simply doesn't matter. That's why when people write dating profiles saying, "I'm looking for serious relationships," or say on first dates that honesty and kindness are very important, that's mostly empty talk. They believe it when they say it. But reality proves otherwise. Because then you ask a simple question. Why did you suffer the most for someone who treated you badly? Same reason. That's also why when a man writes to me saying, "I'm deeply in love," I already understand, something is wrong. Because intense infatuation means that a woman's behavior has triggered ancient instincts. Competition, scarcity, unpredictability. It could be emotional distance. It could be jealousy-inducing behavior. It could be flirtation mixed with coldness. Inconsistency. Contradictions. That's all it takes. Give a man conflicting signals. Strong but submissive, playful but faithful, emotional but logical, ambitious but family-oriented. And you inject a kind of psychological chaos. That chaos activates dopamine. And the man tells himself, "She's special. She's interesting. She's my person." No massive effort is required. And for women, it works almost the same way. When women came to me asking how to make a man fall in love, or how to get him back, in 90 to 95% of cases, those men were not healthy, stable individuals. They were emotionally unstable, inconsistent, problematic. So I'll say it directly. If you're a kind, honest, conscientious man, and you're also naive, your demand will be low. Not zero, but low. There are women who genuinely want a man like that. You are exactly what they're looking for. But there are very few of them. So here's the difference. A foolish person just wants to fall in love with anyone. A reasonable person tries to choose a decent partner and then develop feelings over time. They choose with their head first, not their emotions. And every time I say this publicly, people get angry. How can you live without passion? I'll be unhappy. You're telling people to calculate relationships. Listen. You've lived long enough to know this. If you fall in love with someone today, in a few years your preferences will change. You chose a slim partner, you'll want curves. You chose tall, you'll want petite. You chose blonde, you'll want brunette. That's manageable. But if you chose a quiet person, you'll crave excitement. If you chose chaos, you'll want peace. And this works exactly the same for women. So when someone insists on chasing intense infatuation, they are admitting one thing. They are not looking for their last relationship. They want to fall in love again. And again. And again. Let me explain this in very simple terms. Our nervous system, and the female brain in particular, is designed to constantly seek balance. If we artificially increase testosterone, the body reduces its own production. If we spike dopamine through substances or stimulation, a crash follows. If you've ever had a wild 2-day binge, you know the emotional drop that comes after. The same mechanism applies to relationships. You've probably met women who say, "I just want to be happy." Most of the time, what they really mean is, "I want to feel above my emotional baseline." But the body will always pull you back down. Permanent happiness is impossible. There will always be a correction. That's why extreme highs are followed by deep lows. Sometimes we even see the opposite effect. When things go so badly that all you can do is laugh. The nervous system is always seeking equilibrium. So when a woman says in her dating profile, "I want to fall in love," that's a red flag. Because the brighter and crazier the beginning of a relationship, the louder and more destructive the fights will be a few years later. I've observed this pattern for years. Now, let's talk about men. I watch my sons grow up. And I see how deeply they need approval. They want to be praised. They want to feel chosen. They want to feel like they matter. And that need doesn't disappear with age. Most adult men still crave female validation. Even if they're successful. I'll give you a simple example. Yesterday, I was sitting in a hotel lobby watching people. A tall, well-dressed man walks by. Suit. Beard. Confident posture. At a nearby table, 2 attractive women in evening dresses are sitting. The moment he notices them, he straightens his back, pulls in his stomach. His face becomes serious. Think about that. Even a man who has made it still reacts to female attention. That's why men constantly try to develop competitive advantages. One buys a sports car. Another makes money. Another builds his body in the gym. Everyone chooses what's easiest for them to develop. And that's not necessarily bad. But there are 2 problems. First, you get used to any advantage. A muscular body might bring attention for 6 months, a year, maybe longer. Then it becomes normal. That's why female fitness competitors rarely marry bodybuilders. They've already seen it. It doesn't excite them anymore. Same with money. A wealthy man meets a girl from a small town. Moves her into a luxury life. The first couple of years are euphoria. But soon, wealth becomes her baseline. Her behavior changes. The authority disappears. This pattern repeats constantly. Famous people experience the same thing. I've consulted men who had everything. Looks, money, fame, massive female attention. And still, women left them. Often for men who were objectively worse. Men are always confused by this. How could she leave? He's worse than me in everything. But here's the truth. A woman doesn't sit with a pen and paper calculating your advantages. She follows how she feels. And as we already discussed, feelings are unreliable. That's why female loyalty depends not on a man's status, but on her moral foundation. A good woman will never betray you. Not for a CEO. Not for an actor. Not for anyone. A woman without strong morals will betray anyone. No matter who you are. Female attention feels amazing. It triggers powerful biochemistry. I won't lie, when I was younger and training hard in the gym, I enjoyed it. The looks. The flirting. The validation. But it taught me something important. Female attention is a terrible foundation for relationships. Women have two basic partner selection strategies. The first is choosing the best available option from their environment. The most attractive. The most successful. The most dominant. But this creates a problem. If your self-worth is based on advantages, there will always be someone with more. A better car. More money. More power. Better looks. And that insecurity never goes away. If a woman chooses a man only because he's the best option available, there's no guarantee she'll stop looking. There may always be something better. That's why many men eventually ask themselves, what am I supposed to build my life on if I can't control everything? You can't fully control your health. You can't guarantee stable income forever. You can't control aging. You can't fully control appearance. There are always forces beyond your control. So what can you control? I realized this a long time ago. The only thing a person can truly control is their moral level. Your ethics. Your values. Your principles. Morality changes only through your daily decisions. And if a woman chooses you because of that, betrayal is no longer part of the equation. If morality is the foundation, everything else becomes secondary. That's the only reliable strategy. And here's the paradox. Any man, regardless of age, income, or looks, can build relationships of equality that many celebrities will never experience. Yes, even people from Hollywood envy relationships like that. But there's a reason such relationships are rare. Most people are trapped in the infatuation loop. From their teenage years, no one ever explained anything to them. They just fell in love again and again. Over time, relationships became associated with dopamine, adrenaline, emotional chaos. So by the time they're 25, 30, or older, they believe there's only one possible scenario. I must fall in love first, then everything will work. But life has already proven to them that they can't fall in love with a truly good person. So when they hear an alternative approach, they experience inner conflict. Everything you say makes sense, they tell me. But what do I do with my feelings? I've been there. And here's the answer. Love must be developed. There's a quote I once heard. If you don't have children, you don't know how to love. At first, I didn't understand it. Now I do. Children force you to sacrifice everything. Your lifestyle. Your plans. Your comfort. You adjust where you live, where you travel, how you spend time. You need patience. You're not allowed to explode emotionally. You're forced to practice your best qualities daily. And over time, something changes. You become a different person. Your ability to feel deep, warm, stable love develops. That's why love is not an emotion you find. It's a skill you build. Infatuation is like blasting yourself with pre-workout and stimulants in the gym. Everything feels easy. You're energized. You can't sit still. But try training like that every day. Eventually, you burn out. People who've trained both with and without stimulants know You adapt to both. The same applies here. No one is born with the ability to love properly. It must be developed. So the real question is not, how do I make someone fall in love with me? The real question is, how do I recognize a truly good woman? And how do I learn to want her? And here's the hardest part. You must stop caring about how others evaluate you. Most people can't even organize their own lives. They live in contradictions. Why should their opinion matter? If you feel ready to take action, you know where to start. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. The majority of people don't want love. They want emotional intoxication. They want the dopamine, the obsession, the highs. That's why calm, stable relationships seem boring to them. But stability feels boring only to someone who is addicted to emotional chaos. From a very young age, many people unknowingly train themselves to associate love with intensity. They fall in love. They suffer. They recover. They repeat. Over time, the nervous system adapts. It no longer reacts to calm connection. It demands stronger stimulation. That's why healthy partners don't trigger excitement. They trigger peace. And peace feels unfamiliar. So people reject it. This is the trap of infatuation. Once you understand it, many things become clear. Why good guys are often ignored. Why women return to men who treated them badly. Why men obsess over women who destabilize them emotionally. It's not fate. It's not destiny. It's not astrology. It's neurochemistry. That doesn't mean attraction is useless. It means attraction is not a foundation. You can't build a life on dopamine spikes. They always crash. A reasonable person does something different. They choose a partner with their head first, based on values, morals, and long-term compatibility. And then they build love deliberately. This approach scares people. They say, "That's not romantic. I'll be unhappy. That's settling." But here's the irony. The people who chase infatuation end up alone, bitter, or constantly starting over. The people who choose stability build relationships that get stronger every year. Love is not fireworks. Love is endurance, consistency, choice, and yes, effort. If someone leaves you for another person, it doesn't mean you were not enough. It means they were not capable of choosing long-term value over short-term emotion. A woman with strong morals will not betray you, no matter who appears. A man with strong morals will not destroy his family for excitement. Everything else is decoration. So if you want a relationship that lasts, stop chasing intoxication. Start developing the ability to love. That's the only strategy that actually works.